My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today I want to talk about a thought experiment. This thought experiment is this. Women were asked a question. Would you rather be stuck in a forest with a man or a bear? Very strangely enough, a vast majority of the women said that they would rather be stuck in a forest with a bear. Now, at first glance, right, like why should I care about something like this that seems to be pretty ignorant? And my thought is I actually don't care. I think it's really ignorant. However, I do think that this thought experiment brings up a few good jumping off points and issues that I think do need to be talked about. As I looked into this more, because this went viral and it seems like it's everywhere, it's a little bit disturbing. And I'm going to show you some of the things that I believe this highlights. So, number one, I think it highlights that it's open season to hate men without impunity. And they can do this for any reason. They just make up stuff and it seems to be okay. To be more specific, they even start to say, well, a man is super violent, and typically it's a white man who's super violent, and they make up some real reasons to be more worried about a white guy than it is to be worried about, I don't know, a 1,500-pound apex predator. It's ridiculous. And although on the surface it seems like it would just be funny, but there are a lot of women out there that seem to be so negative towards men, and that our society is moving in this direction, blaming men for everything. And again, they do this without impunity. You're allowed to say it, and again, for no reason. The other thing I think it highlights is that it just reveals how much social media affects people. Because if you see something, then all of a sudden people think it's true and it's real. And because it might be a little bit interesting, or I don't know, it might touch somebody's nerve, what happens there is that it starts accumulating. Again, in this situation, it goes viral and people think that there's some truth to this. But again, there's nothing factual to back up why a person would rather run into an apex predator in a forest than a man. And it seems like people are completely allergic to critical analysis. The other thing this brings up is that, yeah, there are bad things that happen to people in the world. And when you see this many women jumping on this to say, oh, of course, I'd rather be there with the bear. Men suck, men are bad. It just screams out, like, how can you tell me that you haven't overcome your trauma or your victim complex without telling me? And here's a good way to say it. And I think more people should actually be talking about this instead of saying that all these women are perfectly fine in saying this. Let's look at some of the issues, again, that I would like to bring up here. So if you see a man in the woods, you don't know this guy, one thing that could happen is you could be afraid that he might be a sex offender, for example. And yeah, that would be a very real thing to be scared about. So let's talk about sex offending for a while. So I worked in a program that offered treatment to sex offenders. Some of the things that you learn, and you learn it really quick, and you have to learn it really quick, or unlearn some of the other lies that you thought you knew. And here are some of the lies that need to be debunked. A sex offender typically is not some crazy looking weird guy with a trench coat in the middle of the summer, hiding behind a bush, trying to jump out and do something bad to some girl. That typically is not the way it works. The way it does work about 90% of the time is that the sex offenders know their victims. And they know them very well. Why? Because they're in the family. They actually live in the house. That's usually what happens. So what am I saying here? Well, and I've seen this when I've done sex offender treatment, there's always some type of a mom, a sister, whoever, a girlfriend, a wife, doesn't matter. They're there and they are going to protect the sex offender guy. That's what happens a lot of the time. So what you could say here is that almost all sex offenders or sex offender cases that are happening within families, there is a mother, a wife, a girlfriend who absolutely, unequivocally, for sure, beyond a shadow of a doubt, knows that sex offending is going on in the household. What is that called then? Well, the man is a terrible person, right? He needs to be put away to the fullest extent of the law. But there's typically a woman there who knows what's going on. And they are an accomplice to this crime. But we're going to act like they're not dysfunctional as well? I've seen it many, many times that there is a woman who, because the man is paying the bills or mowing the lawn, it's perfectly fine to sell out her daughter and knows that this guy is sexually abusing her, but looks the other way just because of something else. So we have to take a look at that too. When you're doing therapy on a person who has gone through that type of trauma, it's obviously incredibly traumatic to be sexually abused by a family member. But what comes up in every single case is the fact that there was a family member there who knew about it, who didn't do a thing to save them from that. And they looked the other way, and they may believe it didn't happen, and that is almost as bad as the sex offender themselves, if we're considering that the man is the sex offender, because believe it or not, there are plenty of women sex offenders as well. So again, man versus bear, we can't just say that the man is terrible in all these ways. There's a lot of dysfunction going around. I think the one who's not dysfunctional here is probably the bear. That might be true. Another example that I want to look at is 80% of women do report unwanted sexual advances. So again, you meet a man in the woods, there might be an unwanted sexual advance. That could happen. That's a very real thing. However, let's take a look at this and not just do the superficial thing. Let's take a look at what really could be happening here. Society almost requires that men have to make the first move. That's the way society works. If a man wants to be in a relationship, if they want to ask a girl out on a date, it's usually that they're going to have to be the one that makes the first move. Of the men who show the courage enough to ask a woman out on a date or to compliment her, there's going to be a large percentage of times where he is going to be rejected, therefore unwanted. Now, why would this happen? Well, it can happen for a lot of reasons. It could be because the woman is married. It could be because the woman is in a relationship. It could be because the woman is not attracted to him. It could be because the woman wants to be single. She doesn't want anything to do with him. She doesn't want to do it with anything with anybody. And all of that is fine. But when we're looking at 80% of women say that there's an unwanted advance, we have to look at the incredible percentage of time that she's just not interested. So of course it's unwanted. And what changes a lot of this is a woman can say no. Of course she can say no. But on the other hand, if the man is, say, handsome, or he has some attributes that she is attracted to, she still could say no. But she may not say that it's unwanted because she's going to feel flattered by it. So again, in these percentages of 80%, a lot of it is because the man just isn't handsome enough to be able to ask a woman out. I know plenty of women over the years. I live in Las Vegas, so there's a lot of, let's just say it, there's a lot of pretentious women in Las Vegas. If they feel that a man asks them out and they're like not at a level, they'll say, well, you're not at my level. You're not good looking enough to ask me out. What would make you think that somebody like me would want to be with you? And so they become offended by that. So they think that's an unwanted sexual advance somehow because the guy just doesn't have the attractive level that they're looking for. So again, should we put those category of men in a position to say, okay, 80% of men or women are going to be experiencing these unwanted sexual advances that are so terrible and horrifying? No, this is not evilness that is going on here. A lot of times it's just people are trying to make a connection. And what more is there in the world than having emotional connection? People try to get that. Nothing wrong with that. Moving on. Very important. You see a man in the woods. You could be afraid of here? He could be very violent. He could be angry. He can beat you up. That's true. So let's take a look at intimate partner violence. It's a very important subject. Now, there's a ton of empirical evidence out there. Some of it gets a little bit shaky because when you look at it, intimate partner violence, you could be taking the numbers, say, from an emergency room. And it's self-report, some of it sometimes, so that gets a little mixed up. So if you're going to look at injuries, say, from an emergency room about intimate partner violence, what you're going to find is it's like 95% of the time it's a woman being a victim here, and a man is going to be the perpetrator almost all the time. Why? Well, it's because when a man and woman get into a fight, typically it's the man who's bigger and stronger and is going to cause physical harm to a woman. And so that's not a good way to judge about intimate partner violence. The only thing that is really taking a look at is to say, if a man and woman are in a fight, who's typically going to win? So that doesn't say anything about intimate partner violence. So let's look at the numbers a little bit more. Let's look at, say, for example, the American Journal of Public Health. What they say is, of the relationships where there is intimate partner violence, obviously, right, because not every relationship has intimate partner violence, but of the ones who do, 50% of the time, it's reciprocal, meaning that sometimes the man is the aggressor, sometimes the woman is the aggressor, 50% of the time. So it's reciprocal violence. So now let's take that and put that to the side. Of the relationships where there is one perpetrator of intimate partner violence, 70% of the time, it's a woman. Let me say that again. In intimate partner violence, where there is only one perpetrator, 70% of the time, it's a woman. So now when you start comparing a man to a bear, I don't know. Is it possible that the man is the one who's trying to lower the violence down in this situation? In addition, when we're talking about intimate partner violence, women are 2 times more likely to be emotionally abusive. So that's an important thing to know, because also being emotionally abusive also escalates things to maybe physical violence as well. Moving on. So if you're a woman and you're afraid of a man for certain reasons, maybe being more violent, something like this, you might think that in order to have a good, long-term, loving, caring, empathetic, let's say, I don't know, lifelong relationship, your better choice is to be with a woman. That seems to make sense on the surface. Now, if you're in a heterosexual relationship or a marriage, 50% of those, give or take, end in divorce. Those aren't good numbers. So let's put 2 women in a relationship. So if you have lesbians who are married, what are the chances of them having a long-term relationship? Well, 78%, the divorce rate for lesbians is 78%. Massively, massively higher than it is if you were in a heterosexual relationship. Now, how could that be? I thought men were the ones who were doing all the crazy stuff and leaving and all that. Well, here's the thing. 80% of divorces are filed by women in heterosexual relationships. So if 80% of the women are filing for divorce in heterosexual relationships, and now you take 2 women and put them together, it makes sense that the divorce rate is going to skyrocket, because now you have 2 women who are, for whatever reason it could be, are going to end up in a divorce. Now, somebody might say that sometimes that needs to happen. And, that's for a different show. That could be yes, that could be no. However, let's talk about intimate partner violence, because that should never happen in any relationship. So if you're a woman and you're afraid of men because of their violence, then you should be with a woman. Well, not you just can't change your sexuality, but let's just say you did, or you prefer a woman because there's less chance of intimate partner violence. How would that work? How does that work out? Well, unfortunately, intimate partner violence is higher in lesbian relationships than it is in heterosexual relationships. Now, why would this be? Well, there's a lot of ways to take a look at this, but one of the things is that although a lot of people in the year 2024 on social media and who do these thought experiments want to make men always these angry, violent creatures that don't know how to have relationships, and of course, they have no idea how to deal with feelings and emotions, the truth is that most men are indoctrinated from the day that they're born to be white knights and to be chivalrous, meaning that you never touch a woman in anger, you should never be violent to a woman, you shouldn't say bad things to a woman, and you should love her and care about her like she's a soft little flower. And I'm not against any of that. But what I'm saying is when you take the man out of that equation and put another woman in there, where society doesn't have those restrictions, what you're going to get is, in a lesbian relationship, more divorces and more violence. And so back to the beginning again of the thought experiment. Would you rather be stuck in a forest with a man or a bear? I mean, I know it sounds funny, but really what it comes out to is that in the end, no, they wouldn't want to be with a bear, obviously, right? But what they're saying is they are expressing their displeasure for men in general. And what they're doing is they are listening to very, very bad, poor information, which is basically lies, and they're buying into it. And because social media and whatever, Instagram, it's not based off of professional advice. It's based on who could say the craziest stuff and people are believing it. Because there's a complete, I would say, a death in terms of people being smart, let's say. People don't care about that anymore. Again, I could look at a bunch of psychology influencers. I'll tell you who the psychology influencers are. Like when I go to my office, there's a whole bunch of other offices with a bunch of great therapists who are doing great work. They're the people who are the real influencers in terms of psychology. But for some reason, because of social media, all of these other people that don't know a flat out thing about psychology are becoming the influencers. And our society is becoming worse and worse because of that. Anyway, I hope you found some of this entertaining. My name is Joe Peroni. This is the Rise Above Project. Please subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.